Tomorrow, Americans will commemorate Juneteenth, the annual holiday celebrating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans in the United States. For many, the holiday represents a profound moment of triumph, but it also serves as a reminder of our nation's often painful history. And joining us now to talk about this is journalist Victor Luckerson. He's the author of the new book, Built from Fire, the Epic Story of Tulsa's Greenwood District, America's Black Wall Street. Victor, great to see you. We'll talk about the book in a sec, but I want to start asking you about why this holiday has grown in importance and whether it's likely to take on greater significance in the future. You're seeing more Juneteenth celebrations happening around the country, and people are finally understanding what it's all about. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Juneteenth really is an essential holiday for Black America. It began during the Civil War when slaves in Galveston, Texas first learned that they were freed. But it's important to understand that when those slaves learned that, the war had actually already been ended for months. Freedom came, but it came with a catch. And that's really been the story of Black America for so long. Even in Greenwood, the community that I've been writing about for so long in Tulsa, they've been celebrating Juneteenth for more than 100 years. It's a holiday that really holds a lot of value for folks. And it began in that heart of Texas, but it's really spread all over the country. We saw the holiday itself expand so much in national awareness in 2020 when President Trump decided to come to Tulsa on the Juneteenth holiday, to much conflict in the community. I was there on the streets of Tulsa, actually, when Trump was there. I saw how much that decision really hurt the Greenwood community. But, something that came out of that was positive is the fact that so many more folks in our nation are now aware of Juneteenth, honoring it, celebrating it, and I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. And you moved to Tulsa, is that right, to help tell the story of what happened in Greenwood, one of the wealthiest Black communities in the U.S., where hundreds of Black people were murdered by a white mob more than 100 years ago. And occasionally you hear from people from time to time, white people who say, I didn't know about that. I hadn't heard about this. What did you learn when you spoke to some of the community's current residents? And what do you make of how people are finally understanding what took place in one of the most notorious acts of mob violence against the Black community in American history?
Jim, I think every single person, when they learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre, the idea that this thriving community could have been laid to waste, 35 square blocks destroyed, up to 300 people killed. When people hear that, the first thing they say is, how did I not know about this?
Yeah.
And so it's so important for me as a young journalist to travel to this community, embed myself there, and really try to tell this story in an in-depth way. It's really important for people to understand that though the Tulsa Race Massacre was a horrific event, Greenwood cannot only be defined by its trauma and only be defined by those 2 days. So this story that I put together really captures that community over the course of more than 100 years. It was such a privilege for me to be able to meet, for example, the Goodwin family. There's a single family that's been in Greenwood on Black Wall Street for more than a century. They came to Tulsa seeking what all families want, a better education for their children. And so they arrived in Tulsa in 1914. They established a business right there on Greenwood Avenue. They, like so many others, had their homes and their livelihoods tragically destroyed during the race massacre. But the Goodwin stayed and rebuilt. They helped their neighbors to rebuild, and they're still right there on Greenwood Avenue. Now, I've developed a friendship with Jim Goodwin. He's an 83-year-old attorney in Greenwood. He also owns the Black newspaper, the Oklahoma Eagle, that the Goodwin family owns. And so it's really been a pleasure to talk to people like him who are both so resilient, but also so adamant about the fact that justice has not been served to the people in that community. And we're still seeking reparations, still seeking justice, and still seeking so many things that Black folks have been denied in this country, really since the Civil War and since Juneteenth began being celebrated as a holiday.
Yeah, and as you know, Victor, there's a lot of political pushback coming from the right in this country to teaching kids about this nation's troubled history when it comes to race. What are your thoughts on that? How do we overcome that? Is it possible to overcome that with so much being injected to it politically these days, that subject of teaching about race in America?
Really is a tumultuous time, Jim. I spent a lot of time working on my book actually embedded in the state capitol. Another member of the Goodwin family, Jim's family, is actually a state legislator, Regina Goodwin. She's one of the few Black people in the Oklahoma State Legislature. And so I was sort of had a firsthand view of this conservative backlash you're talking about. I saw how in Oklahoma, House Bill 1775 was passed in 2021, saying that if a student felt uncomfortable in the classroom, a teacher could be punished for that. There's just so much ambiguity in the way that these laws are written, and we can sort of see the way that some conservatives are exploiting that ambiguity in order to make it harder for teachers to do their jobs. One thing that really worries me about this backlash is that in some ways it mirrors what was going on in Oklahoma before 1921. We saw in Oklahoma a place that was a one-point egalitarian, almost utopian in some senses, but that decided to import Jim Crow policies from the Deep South. And it seems like we're kind of seeing something similar today, where all of these individual states and Republican legislatures are deciding to sort of embed discrimination in various forms into their laws. And so I think what we really need to do as Americans is be vigilant about stamping out hateful rhetoric when we see it, about opposing laws that are not in our interest, and really about being allies to each other in these tumultuous times.
Yeah. Well, we just have to know about our history. I mean, why not teach about our history? It's our history. Victor Luckerson, great stuff. Great conversation. Thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
All right.